will happen. And the client's like, fabulous, thank you for that certainty.
Exactly.
And we don't have that certainty. Something I always say to my students is I say, actuaries are always wrong.
Yeah.
Always wrong. Like, we are never right. But like, to what degree?
I love that.
And I'm like, you can say it's going to be 10 Rand and it will be maybe 10 Rand 50 cents.
Yes.
It's not materially wrong.
Yes.
But you're very unlikely to get it right to the cent, kind of thing.
Yes.
And you have to be okay with that.
Yes.
And so something else I want to talk about with regards to past papers is time management. Students seem to really struggle with this, especially with the written exams. I think in the technical exams, yes, there's that element of time management. But something I say to my students there is I say, just forget about the answer in the technical exams. Majority of the marks, if it's a 10-mark question, 9 of them are for the process. And I've said this before in the podcast, my LifeCon exam, I didn't write one answer.
Yes.
Not one answer, and I got my exemption.
Yeah.
Because the lion's share of the marks are for your process. So in the technical, don't overemphasize the Rand value answer.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
Just try and put as much of your thinking down because that's what they're trying to develop.
Yes.
But I think when it comes to the written exams, students are forever not finishing.
Yes.
Or sort of writing too much or that sort of thing.
Fine balance.
Yeah. So what would be some of the pointers you would give around time management? I think especially also with regard to structuring answers. Because I think so often
you go head first into it and now you're down a rabbit hole.
And you've written like 17 paragraphs, which you're probably saying the same thing 15 times kind of thing. So what would be your kind of thoughts there?
So I look at writing an exam like running a marathon. So you have 3 hours to finish the marathon.
Yeah.
But the planners of this marathon are very nice to you. They tell you up front that, listen, we're going to give you the map.
Yes.
We'll give you the course before you start running. You can do whatever kilometer you would like in whichever order.
You can imagine just something
just immediately teleport post to that. But the great thing about that is if you had told someone that, they would be insane for not planning their route, right?
Yeah, like, ridiculous.
What do you mean that you just started running? You just immediately out of the gate started running?
Yes.
So we start with planning.
Yes.
So the reason we do planning is because, again, we have all of these abstract thoughts. You now have 100 marks in a 3-hour paper, so 1.8 benchmark.
Yes.
That you have to get down. Your brain is not going to handle those. You're stressed. You're potentially sleep deprived.
You maybe had issues logging into the platform.
Exactly.
Like you're feeling anxious. Yeah.
You are not going to get 100 marks worth of words from these abstract images when they're needed.
Yes.
So that's why we plan, is to help us understand the context of the question.
And also to just calm us down a bit,
Exactly.
right? Because in the planning, you can sometimes reread a question or be like, oh, okay, actually, I thought it was about this, but actually there's a little bit more nuance in that.
Yes. So I like it. Pulling from our actuarial knowledge, 3 lines of defense.
Yes.
So your first line is a read through of the paper. This is where you're saying, sure, kilometer 15, I'm going to struggle.
It's going to be a tough.
That's not even uphill. That is like off a mountain. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. Yeah. So the first read through is literally looking at that. Okay, what sections are these coming from?
And just to stop you there, this first read through, I mean, students forever ask me, how should I use my reading time? And in a 3-hour exam, you generally get 15 minutes. So when you're talking about this read through, are you talking about primarily in that reading time?
So yes, starting in your reading time.
Okay.
But now what you're wanting to do is, well, you're not the average runner. You are a runner. That means practice however you have. But what you don't want to do is you have a 1.8 minute cut off time.
Yes.
You don't want to be the last person over the line at the like milestone.
Yes.
So what you want to do is you want to give yourself a bit of buffer.
Yes.
So that you can figure out how the race is going for you.
Yes.
When you're doing your past papers, is aiming towards 1.5 minutes.
Yes.
So when you're practicing past papers, what I find very useful is just looking at the planning of questions.
Yes.
You're not going to write the paper because it takes 3 hours. You're just going to plan a paper.
Yes.
You're going to take half an hour.
Yes.
And what you're doing is you're first reading through the paper, just a read through.
Yes.
To basically see where are the hills? Where do I have absolutely no idea where I'm going?
So where are the flats? Where are the easy
Exactly.
ones?
Where can I knock out my definitions as soon as I start writing?
Yeah.
The second read through is your planning read through. That is where you're now, so you're going to go and set your milestones. The reason I also say 1.5 minutes a mark as opposed to 1.8 is 7 times 1.8 could no idea. Give me a calculator.
I hear you.
1.5, great. It's the thing plus half of it. So
Yes.
10-ish minutes.
Yes.
And then that is where your flair comes in. That is where the art of exam writing comes in.
Yeah.
Is this an 11 mark? Is this a 10 mark?
Yes.
A 10-minute question, an 11-minute question.
Yeah.
That's largely by the first read through, and because you've now studied and you've had an eye at doing races. This isn't your first marathon.
Yeah.
You've done some past papers under exam conditions.
Yeah.
So that when you're there, you understand, sure, by halfway through the paper, I'm going to need a water break. I need a coffee break. So what you're then going to see is now you've read through the paper twice. So firstly, you've kind of seen the general areas of it. The second time where you've now done your planning, and your planning is there not to rewrite your answers. This isn't like planning essays in English where you wrote the thing in pencil, and you rewrote it in pen, and you just erased everything. This is putting everything from your brain so that you're offloading the mental task to the paper.
Yeah.
Your prior version, your second line of defense when you've done your planning. It is the person doing the work.
Yes.
It is the person who should know where things are going wrong.
Yes.
Your third line is then the read through of the paper.
Yeah.
As when you've actually now started. So now what you'll find is that your planning may go over 15 minutes. But what's quite nice is if you take a little bit longer, let's say half an hour, or because you're working at 1.5 minutes a mark, you should actually have 30 minutes remaining.
Yes.
Minus the 15 you're now using for reading and planning in addition. So at 15 minutes at the end of a paper.
Yes.
So when you're now going through this paper, you are rereading a question. There's a third line of defense. There are now 3 versions of yourself, one of which is hopefully the least stressed out of the 3,
Yes.
who is now looking at this again. So this prevents the complete wrong topic, misread the question out of it.
Yeah.
Now, with your 1.5 minute milestones, what you're doing is you are implicitly optimizing for the maximum amount of marks you can get in the paper, because it means you will always finish a paper number 1.
Which is massive.
Exactly, because a lot of students, when they just steam through a paper without needing or planning, end up getting to either the easiest or hardest question at the end where there's marks left.
Yeah.
Where they could have actually got marks. It's not about the answer, it's about the process.
Yeah.
We want to see that you have a general understanding about these topics.
Yeah.
And so when you're now going through this paper at 1.5 minutes a mark, this is also when we now start to triage. There's been like an emergency at the marathon. Oh my word, people are dying.
Yes.
Red, orange, and green.
Yes.
Your green questions, so some will also just be blank questions, like, I'm done here, move on.
Yeah.
The green questions are, sure, if I had extra time in the world and everything goes my way, this would be lovely to maybe throw a couple more bullet points at if I have time.
Yeah.
Your yellow questions are, sure, this person is like hemorrhaging, but I can make them stable.
Yes.
This is not going to ruin your paper, but you should probably come back to it.
Yes.
This is often application where your numbers aren't working out and the comments don't work.
Yes.
Little sticky notes, you're just going to flag things.
Yes.
Your red paper is, oh my god, this person has an arm that's chopped off and my initial diagnosis said that their leg is gone.
Yeah,
They have both legs. What is going on? I had no idea. You flag it, you move on. You're not going to waste 1.5 minutes and stress yourself out if you know it's not going well. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to carry on with your paper.
Yes.
What ends up happening in your subconscious is as you're going through other papers, this relational thinking, what's great about if you move into this relational thinking is by its nature, some nodes in the network,
your brain is kind of,
so by answering a question afterwards, you're like, oh, this is the opposite of this. This is related in this way. I saw this here.
Yes.
You go back in the planning notes, you quickly jot down the things you've now remembered and you come back to the red question. You now have an extra 15 minutes of additional reading time, additional thinking just to tackle this question.
Yeah.
So you're now moving through the paper, you're optimizing for marks, you will always make sure you're finishing in time, and you are attacking the questions you know best. You're giving yourself the best chance for the exam.
Yeah, I agree. I think one other thing I would add to that is that students sometimes, they allocate their time to the question, to the part of the question that has the marks allocated to it.
Yeah.
And they sometimes forget that there's context to the question, like that initial blurb.
Yes.
And that takes time to understand, right? So don't just allocate your time to those sort of like outline, discuss questions where there's a mark allocation. Remember, you also need to give time to understanding the whole context of the question.
Yes.
Because so often students will say to me, but I allocated my time when I was doing the question, and then it didn't add up. And then I say to them, okay, but did you allocate time to the upfront context of the question where there's maybe 5 sentences there contextualizing the questions that follow.
Yes.
But those 5 sentences you also have to spend time on because
they are part of the answer.
So I think that is also an element of exam technique. But last thing I want to say on past papers is part of the reason I also say to students not to start them too early is that you can never look at a question for the first time more than once.
Yeah.
And so if you do pass papers too early, you lose sort of like that optimization that you talked about. You lose the biggest gain that you would have got from it. if you were fully prepared, approaching it and then doing it under exam conditions. When you do that too early, then often
feedback is more like random noise.
And then,
you don't even know what you don't know, so you don't even know what you're getting wrong. So you don't even know how to improve the things you're getting wrong. Where's the error coming in? It could be 17 different places. It could be your time management. It could have been that you were so off on a topic. It could be because there's other things you haven't covered yet. There's so many things that can go wrong. That is very much that's.
And there's only so many past papers. Do you know what I mean? So you don't want to be using them flippantly because it's a resource and like they're gold in many ways, and you have to, your return on investment from them has to be at the place where you have
to be maximized as well.
Exactly.
My last point on that, I suppose, is on the past papers. Like you said, they're a finite resource. But if we approach education with the idea of, but it's understanding. The worthiness of it's just a transformation of other information. So while yes, maybe the particular body that you're writing through has a finite resource, the knowledge that is being tested is tested all over the world. It's also tested in weird and wonderful ways. One of the great things I found when studying is to use podcasts. So like this is phenomenal. So what I would do is I would find Society of Actuary podcasts, IFOA podcasts, and what you're looking for is topics related to whatever you're writing on. And what you're doing is you're practicing that consolidation and recall. Can I recall what I think they are going to be talking about? And can I reconsolidate, moving back from that call to consolidate and saying, but what they're talking about, how does that influence my notes? What are they talking about in my notes that is relevant to that? So then you suddenly start to see that application happens everywhere. So you don't have to only apply it in a test setting. You are actually testing your knowledge all the time. And you're just displaying it in a test setting.
I agree with that. I think my last comment here would be that in approaching exams, regardless of whether it's technical or the later ones, the emphasis as a student should always be proficiency. It should never be about the mark that you get. And I know that just wanting to pass, I understand that drive. I understand the drive to want to finish board exams. But having been a qualified actuary now and seeing that there were some gaps in my understanding in certain subjects where I got an exemption, I passed the board exam. I wish that I had had a slightly different emphasis in going about it and saying, I'm building proficiency, not just getting a stamp on approval here. And I really want to encourage students in that, especially those that are repeating, to say, okay, maybe you weren't able to show that proficiency, but now you get another chance.
Second line of defense.
And in doing that, don't just be like, I just want to pass. Say, I want to fill the gaps that I obviously had when I first attempted this. And I think that that's really important, being a qualified actuary now and seeing those gaps in myself, and also realizing how sometimes I'm insecure about those gaps because I've never gone back and filled them. And sometimes I fill them ad hoc. And if I had my time again, I think I would try and frame it a bit better.
And then also learning, I suppose that's a big thing, and sort of reflection on it. Reflecting on where this went wrong, where it went wrong in the past paper, not just marking it, but actually looking at like, where were my gaps? And then if you go about it that way, I mean, you'll be running marathons, drawing cats, left, right, and center.
All of them. Brett, thank you so much for this chat.
Thank you for having me.
It, as always, is a pleasure. And I think really, really insightful comments.
No, thank you. And happy exam writing to all your
good luck. We back you. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review on your preferred streaming platform. If you'd like to interact with us more or add questions or topics to our pool of ideas, please follow our Instagram page at AsForActuary or email us on asforactuary@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Take care.